I've got my pencil. I'm good to go.
Excellent. It says we are live. Hi, everyone. Number one Marmaduke fan here. And today I am joined by
Good
that.
to go.
Awesome. It says I'm joined by that comic gal, aka Aliza Ariel Forrest. Say hi to everyone. Say hi to everyone, that comic gal.
Hi guys, that comic gal here. It's Elisa though, not Eliza.
Sorry, Alisa.
It's
Awesome.
okay. My
Awesome.
mother. Sorry.
So that comic gal, I noticed your art on Twitter recently. It's sort of like sometime last month, I just started seeing people sharing your work, and I noticed a lot of it. And you've done a lot of neat fan art for people on comics Twitter and comics YouTube. So tell us a little bit about the art you do and what's inspired you to become an artist.
Well, I think I actually joined around April, so it's been a few months. I didn't expect for my art to be so liked on Twitter. I've been kind of used to it being ignored on other platforms. So it's a good change though. It's been absolutely wonderful. Um, as for my art, I'd say my style is a weird hybrid of manga and comics, and a lot of my inspirations come from those areas as well.
I like that. I think it's really wise for an artist to look at multiple sources to gain inspiration. Tell us about some projects you've done recently. For example, I noticed you did a art project for Beatdown Girl, and that's actually what reminded me to go and support the Beatdown Girl Indiegogo campaign. So, who are some characters that you've been drawing recently?
Ah, yes, the Beatdown Girl one. I actually drew that to encourage people following me to go and support Beatdown Girl because I recently met the creator and he is a stand-up guy and really funny. Um, I actually hope I get to talk to him more. He seems like a cool dude. For the most part, whenever I draw characters from within our community, it's because I have become friends with the creator. The only exception being when I just came in, I was, of course, drawing fan art for Ethan Van Sciver, just some guy, and DNC. And I'm not friends with EVS or DNC yet, and I'm not friends with just some guy also yet. I'm very determined, though.
Good forward thinking there. Tell me a little bit about how you first discovered DNC and Just Some Guy in EBS.
That's actually kind of a funny story. My dad was actually a DNC fan for quite some time, so I was kind of used to hearing DNC's videos from his phone as he watched them. I didn't actually, and sometimes he'd like wave me over for me to watch like a specific part of them. But like until I found out about Hydra Cap and had my heart absolutely destroyed by that, I
Oh,
did. Yes. My captain, my poor captain has been like one of my favorite superheroes since I was very little because he was that small weak guy who became strong, and I've always been like a small weak girl. So he was very inspiring to me, and the fact that as an adult I still have enjoyed that character, and only to have him just so destroyed, and all the stories I read as a child growing up completely demolished by him being Hydra the whole time. I actually cried. Um,
so you had like a personal investment in some of these conversations that were going on about these comic characters and changes to them.
yeah. I didn't really have any friends growing up, so in a weird way, these characters became like friends to me. X-Men, Spider-Man, and Captain America in particular were my boys and girls.
I
So
love that, and I really click with that. I mean, for me, like I was homeschooled, so reading about these comic characters, what was a big part of my young life. Before I was in a regular school and had more friends my age in that
yeah,
environment.
yeah, it's escapism. So you feel that you're there, or you want to be there. These are characters who you either relate to or want to become or just, want to hang out with. And when you're a lonely kid, that or especially a lonely bullied kid in my case, that means so much. I probably wouldn't have been able to get through a lot of the things I did growing up if it weren't for these characters in these comics.
And when the characters are transformed in such a way that it sort of breaks the appeal of the character, I think a lot of creators, comic pros, they miss the effect that has for people who see these characters as either a kind of escape from problems or a way of informing you about how to deal with your problems. I thought a lot about Peter Parker lifting that big heavy weight of scrap metal off of his back. That's something you look at as a young person and say, okay, if my if these fictional characters I like can do this, I can bring some of that attitude into my own life.
Yeah, it really does help you get through a lot. And that's the importance of these heroes. That's why, especially kids growing up now, I feel they sometimes you just need a hero. You need someone to encourage you to continue going on. Because the big thing about heroes is not that they're people in costumes who punch bad guys. It's that they're people in costumes who don't always win, but even when they lose, even if they've lost loved ones, even if they've lost limbs or their mental state, or have been damaged by it in some way, they get back up again and they keep fighting. That's the
I think
importance of these characters.
I think that's a fantastic way of looking at the importance of comic characters, and that stretches beyond just young people. I mean, kids love superheroes. They're bright and colorful. They go on exciting adventures. But that's the aspect of superhero characters that you can carry with you into adulthood and look back on and remember well.
Yeah, and it stays with you even when you grow up. So when that happened, I was just so devastated. I started watching DNC too, and through him, I found out about EVS and just some guy and all these other people. And for a long time, okay, for like about two, actually, it's like almost 3 years now. After I came home from my first year of college, I wound up not going back to college. I was kind of a depressed mess with no motivation to draw or anything. For a long time, I wasn't drawing, and just having my love of comics renewed by listening to DNC and having and like watching all of EVS's old how to draw videos. I'm sorry about the thing in the background.
You got a puppy? All right. I think that comic gal is
Three of
taking
them.
care of it. You got it?
Yeah. They heard the doorbell. They went
All right, an excitable doggo. Well, I don't know if you can tell, but I have a great appreciation for dogs, so that's cool.
That's I have like a Sheltie mix named Darlie, and my parents have two little fluffy white dogs, including a puppy who's only 3 months old named Miko.
Very nice. So you're telling us about, yeah, sort of the early days of EVS's channel and sort of drawing along with EVS.
Yeah, he had those how to draw videos and like what supplies. And the thing is, when I was really, really little, and of course I loved comics and I loved drawing, so I wanted to draw comics, but I gave up when I got older. And when you have that love just renewed and you have that motivation to draw again, I was like, you know what? If I keep at it, if I keep practicing, I'll be able to draw comics.
That's fantastic. And would you say that Just Some Guy has also had an impact on you in that manner? I think of his video where he talks about struggling with his own desire to keep making art, and for me, that was a really good moment to hear
Yeah.
someone with talent talk about how he's had those sort of moments of doubt or hesitation too.
Oh, without a doubt. Just his personality too. He seemed closer in age to me than the other reviewers on YouTube. So I was like, and he seems he really really cool. So I honestly was just like, this is a guy who's a lot more like me. So him putting out a video like that it kind of resonated with me more on that level because this is a guy who I could have gone to college with in my mind at least. I found out he was older than I thought. But
Well, DNC and EBS definitely have the sort of the dad joke aspect to their channel in the
they're
community. So
just
I think
they're
that
dads. EBS in particular, his Star Wars rants reminds me exactly of my dad.
These channels were a prompt for you to start drawing again. Tell me a little bit about how you work. Do you have a mix of traditional and digital tools at your disposal?
Well, around last December, because I was doing a few digital works at that time. At least I was teaching myself how to digital. Just last December, I found out though that I can ink and do the lines a lot faster by hand. So I've been doing all my sketching and inking by hand, and then popping that into the scanner and going ahead and coloring that all digitally.
And in addition to your your old header before your new header is a Mr. Marvel piece, right?
Yes.
And your old one was a send up of the infamous Spider Woman cover, which I remember my feminist professors coming into class and showing us a picture of that Spider Woman cover and being furious at this illustration of the male gaze and horrible sexist comic book readers. And I love that for a while you had your take on that cover as your header image. Tell us a little bit about that aspect to your work.
You mean how I tick off probably every feminist within 100 miles?
Definitely, because that's pretty interesting to me. So, what is it? I mean, there there's all kinds of artists, right? And one kind of artists are people who just love drawing beautiful men and beautiful women. But you've also got this sort of teasing aspect to it, which I like. It's sort of a little bit of uh, not even so much a middle finger. It's more just like go jump off a cliff kind of gesture to I think this sort of really prudish aspect of our culture. So tell us a little bit about how you came to make work like that.
I've always kind of been a I do what I want type of person. I will say that for the longest time, I actually believed a lot of feminist rhetoric, and I was afraid. I tried not to draw anything too sexy and such. But when I was really little and I was that comic fan, I do sexy things all the time. So I just like with my love of comics renewed, I was like, why does this even matter? See, the truth is, if you're confident in being a woman, then you should be confident in what makes a woman a woman, in that aspect of femininity. I can't word.
Of femininity. Uh, you might want to double check your mic real quick, like unplug it and plug it back in, because I think we lost part of the sentence there.
My mic is attached. It's built in. I am hearing a bit of an echo,
Oop,
so
I was probably holding my mic too close again. Sorry. Uh, so what I clicked with what you were just saying is if you're confident in who you are, you can be confident in drawing what you want to draw, right?
yeah. And like I actually had my little sister take a picture of me doing that infamous Spider Woman pose on the couch in order to make sure I was getting it right.
Oh boy.
So,
Yeah, siblings siblings can have all kinds of embarrassing stories that no one else gets to see.
yeah, like, hey, sis, take a picture of me. What are you doing? Why are you sticking your butt in the air like that? Like, it's for art. You don't understand. It was a bonding moment for sure.
Yep.
Um, like, hey, you're home from college. Help me with this thing. Uh, yeah. I will say that to me, men and women have enough significant differences, both in their mind and their physical form, and I feel that it should be celebrated. The female form in particular has kind of adapted to become beautiful and attractive to men, like over the course of countless generations. It is, in a way, a work of art that has taken all of mankind's existence to get to the point that it's at. So where it's at right now and the beauty in that should be celebrated
Right,
as
right.
the art it is.
Andrew Clavin likes to say that female beauty is something that brings joy in life. And there seems to be like a new political movement that hates it when people experience this kind of joy. And it's true of male and female beauty. I find, ancient male Greek sculptures to be very beautiful and very, very wonderful too. But there seems to be like maybe a stronger aspect to I just personally think that women are more beautiful than men. So, sorry, fellow guys, and that's an important part to fantasy characters like superheroes, because part of the whole point of fantasy characters is that they have to look a particular way. Good guys in fantasy look like beautiful people. Bad guys in fantasy, they look like ugly, horrible monsters. That's such a key characteristic to what makes a good fantasy story. Would you agree?
I will, and I will say that one of the reasons why manga is has been outselling comics like crazy is because all the characters are made to be attractive, and not only that, but there's a thing your brain does. Actually, I found out when I I did do some research on comic creation and whatnot when I was in college for papers, at least, because that love is always going to go with you. But to put it simply, the less detail there is in a face to make it realistic, the more a person's brain tends to put their face in place of that face. So
Yeah,
you're able to relate to a character more the less detailed and realistic they are. And because manga and anime characters aren't as realistic as American comic characters, it's easier for the reader to go, "That's me."
definitely. It helps bring the new reader into the world.
Mhm.
Uh, are you familiar with Full Metal Alchemist at all in reading manga?
Yes.
I love Hiromu Arakawa. She draws herself as a cow in whenever she does like a little uh, author's comment or like a comedic joke showing you the behind the scenes. She just draws herself as a cartoon cow, and she will kind of very bluntly say that she thinks that men have to be like really power. They need to look powerful, and the women need to look va va voom is her word for it. And that's just such a great blunt way of putting the appeal of manga. This is an iconic female manga artist, and she gets that when young people read a fun adventure story, they want to see sort of beautiful, idealized characters, male and female.
Oh, they do. Actually, attractive people in general, like for example, a baby will actually stare longer and like willingly just go and look at and stare at a person with an attractive face more than a person with an ugly face. This is an instinct that we have from like the moment we open our eyes and see the world around us. We like to look at pretty things and attractive things.
Yes.
It's nothing
So
to do that.
I think this is a nice segue into talking about your pretty and attractive art. So tell us a little bit about how you draw yourself. I kind of pick up a strong Spider Gwen inspiration in the character you draw that represents yourself. So tell us a little bit about why you draw yourself the way you do.
Well, I will say that Spider Gwen definitely had an inspiration because that costume is amazing. Everyone loves the costume. The comics, but the costume is freaking gorgeous. And I wanted to make it with a lot of pink because pink is the feminine color, and I'm a gal. I'm that comic gal. So I wanted to have a ridiculous amount of pink in my design, as well as a nice contrast between black and white. and I exaggerate things. Like I have big hips and I have thick thighs and a big butt. So I just exaggerate the hay out of that when I draw myself. And to the point that it's become a running joke and almost part of my branding. And my header was just a butt for a while.
Yeah. Well, and Mr. Marvel clearly got that aspect when he did his art for
Oh
you.
yes, aspect. Indeed.
So I think I want to talk a little bit more about how you work. So you mentioned that there's this that you use these traditional materials. Tell us a little bit about how you might start a drawing. I mean, you might get inspiration to draw a character like Beatdown Girl, but tell us how you begin the process.
Normally I actually rough out the pose first. And the face just kind of starts out as just an oval, especially if I'm working on a more interesting pose or an even action pose. Sometimes I'll pull a stupid and I'll just completely draw and render the head and then just attach on a body. Or I actually did the reverse for the Ghostbusters Regina art piece, in which case I drew the body and then I had to figure out how to attach the head, which was an interesting process.
But
um,
yeah, I like that there can be like a little bit of variety to your approach. Sometimes you'll kind of tackle it one way, and sometimes you'll tackle it another way.
Yeah, it depends because in the case of the Ghostbusters Regina pose, I had a pose in mind, but I couldn't find any references for it at all. And I couldn't ask anyone to take pictures of me for it. So I was just like, dang it, how do I need to figure out the pose first. So I wound up doing the body first because of that.
Do you ever use a mirror to study yourself?
The only big mirror we have in the house that I could do that in is the bathroom mirror, and which requires climbing onto the bathroom counter.
Okay, so
Which
there's there's a few I don't know practical obstacles to using it that way.
yeah.
It's clear that you use yourself as a model often, and I've done that. I'll use my hands as a model when drawing hands. How do you even do that when drawing other characters or characters who look quite different from you? Like, would you use yourself as just to get a rough idea, even when drawing a male character, for example?
That actually kind of the whole male character thing actually, yeah, it was hard for me to draw dudes for the longest time. Sorry, because I was so used to knowing, hey, I'm female and my body works like this. So I know how a female's body works and moves and poses. And I kept drawing dudes in like girly poses or just not masculine looking and stuff. For the longest time, especially when I was younger. Um,
There is a tendency to sort of think of yourself as you draw, which means that sometimes your facial features or your peculiar characteristics might show up in the final drawing almost unconsciously.
yeah, that this is very true. I think even Troy mentioned that he didn't realize it till later, but he gave his character Juanpool his teeth.
Oh,
And just little things like that, you just don't realize it sometimes. But like in a weird way, especially if you're doing a comic character or a character that you've already given a story to, you just tend to think of them as a part of you. Like this character's in your head with their personality and their backstory and everything all the time. So they are a part of you, and then when you draw them, you kind of take that a bit literally at times.
I like that you think about personality and character as you describe drawing these characters. You've mentioned that you've wanted to do comics. What kind of comics would you envision yourself doing in the future?
Well, I do have a comic idea. It actually It was the first thing when I was little and I wanted to draw comics. I drew this comic. It never got past only 2 pages, which is just like an introduction to the characters, and their occupations and whatnot. But it was based on a pun too. The comic was called To Hell and Black. So like to get it to hell and
Yeah, to
yeah.
hell and back. I kind of I identify with that because before I got interested in Comicsgate, I maybe like 4 pages of a comic I had always dreamed of making, but I didn't feel inspired, or I felt like my art my that aspect of my art was dying. I was still doing art. I just wasn't doing comic art anymore. But with kind of like my renewed interest in comics, then I went and dusted that off and have been really trying to nail that down. So I really click when people have been thinking of an idea for a long period of time, and especially if there's been like a time period where it's just sort of waited on the back burner for you to pick it up again.
Yeah, this one was actually on off for several years. Um, Actually, I think I came up with the character when I was like 11, even. So she's like 10 years old now. But the thing is, I made her when I was being bullied and stuff. So a lot of her aspects were ones I wished I had at the time. Like I wished I could be strong. I wished I could be tall and beautiful and have friends and and all this other stuff. And the comic I'd like to do is her journey to how she became this character that was built to be all the things I wanted, essentially, that I wanted to be. How did she become so tall? How did she gain those around her? How did she become liked? And that character, and she just kind of built herself from those questions. I feel like whenever you're drawing, there's so much personality that needs to be kept in mind to just like the posing and the way they stand, how confident the character is, how that character would dress and what expressions they'd make. You can't really separate the two.
What you say reminds me a bit of the artist for Sailor Moon, describing how she wanted to write a story where a character would have the kind of friends that she would want to have in real life. So there's this definite aspect of desiring something and bringing those desires into the world of the story that you're building.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about the fan art you've done. So we've talked about Mista Marvel. We've mentioned Beatdown Girl. Tell us some projects that you're following or creators that you've done drawings for in this community.
Well, I will say that due to the whole Shira Hira thing that went down, I wound up drawing a lot of. I wound up drawing not only my own design for Shira, but wound up drawing, the trap version Zira a lot as well. I did a few little bits where the two were siblings, and it's just Adam dressing in his sister's clothes.
Oh gosh, you're cashing in on that those hot internet art debates.
Yeah, I find that whenever I get into a stupid argument with stupid people, and once again, hold on,
Hey,
my
doggo.
laptop.
So, by the way, if you're in the chat, if you at me, I'll see it, and we can take those as questions for that comic gal once the doggo is taken care of. Mike Whitaker is here. Your work is never done. Jack Irons is here, the creator of Jack Irons, the Steel Cowboy. I backed that one on Indiegogo. Our friend Carl's Amateur Hour is here. Vile Delinquent is here. Oh, the Vile Delinquent, I'm here. What did I miss? How is everyone? Sorry for being late. Well, Vile Delinquent, we still have that comic gal on. We've been discussing sort of how she came to be aware of the community, how she discovered diversity in comics and Ethan Van Sciver, and how Ethan Van Sciver's drawing videos and just some guys' videos on art really helped her come back to her art. So we've also been discussing things she cares about in her art. We talked a little bit about feminism and kind of like the feminist problem with sexiness in art. and we've been talking about other people in the community, like our boy Rags, like our boy Mr. Marvel, and Archie's had an opportunity to draw for them. I think she's taking care of a puppy right now. Check in the chat. Some talk about the branding and the prominence of the hips in that comic gal's art. I definitely noticed that. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's an important part of superhero characters in general. The gluteus maximus is like the largest muscle in the body. It deserves some prominence on very muscular, heroically proportioned characters. Oh, people are talking about Zira in the chat. Yeah, I haven't drawn anything for Zira yet. That was a meme I just didn't have time to hop on. But there are also competing versions of that. There was Rag's Zira. There was EBS's She-Ra. There was Mr. Marvel had the idea of drawing She-Ra as more of a much younger girl. So if the idea for the new She-Ra series was to make She-Ra a young character who's rising, well, why not emphasize that a bit more and make her a very young character who's kind of got like a very enthusiastic imagination. So I'm still reserving judgment on the new She-Ra series, but I'm all for having a laugh at anything, even if I think that the She-Ra cartoon looks like it might be pretty good. That I have no problem with people making fun of the design. Well, is the doggo taken care of?
Yes, I'm sorry. We have this one of my parents' dogs. It has a really ironic name. Her name is Serenity, and she just is very loud and very mean.
All right. I managed to just get everyone caught up on what our conversation had been, who had only just recently joined us. So we're good. So we were talking about your art and people in the community that you've supported by doing fan art, which I think is a huge benefit. Jack Irons could tell us about this. He is always retweeting Jack Irons fan art, and I think he really appreciates it because what an artist is really doing is saying, I care so much about this independent project. I'm going to devote my skill and my time to letting people know how awesome I think it is. So that's one aspect of your Twitter that I've really appreciated, and I'd love if you tell us more about it.
Actually, if I remember correctly, I actually did a really rough sketch of Jack Irons that I sent to him via DM. And I was like, I drew this thing for you here. And that was after we had hijacked the thread together, and our friendship was born from there. I will say that Brian, for the Rags team, he doesn't want me drawing anything for Rags unless he pays me.
Okay.
So I have actually drawn some fan art for him, but I cannot post it because I don't want him to pay me money for my fan art.
But then that means there's that comic gal art that's hidden from the world.
Yes, there is that comic gal, really, really rough sketches hidden from the world that the world may never know.
Well, Rags is doing pretty well for the indie comics scene. I mean, we've been moving the needle pretty hard for that. So I would take that as a high compliment that he wants to. Were you involved in that? I'm trying to think of it. Were you involved in one of the projects on Rags's TeePublic site?
Yes, I've actually done 2 of them. I did a cover that's going to be one of the variant covers for issue 3. And the funny thing is that's actually the one image that got me more well known in the community. And if it wasn't for that one image and me getting commissioned to do that one image, pretty much all the jobs I've gotten so far and all the promotion that the Rags team has so wonderfully given me, I would not have made so many friends. I would not have gotten as well liked within the community if it wasn't for that. So I'm incredibly grateful to Brian and the Rags team.
I think people really appreciate seeing an artist share their time that way. So the reason it's appreciated is that the very act of making fan art for an independent project shows shows those creators a lot of appreciation. So it's reciprocal. It's like you're showing a lot of love, so people are going to want to give you some love back for doing that. Carl's Amateur Hour says, what are your thoughts on Nintendo reducing the size of both Samus's breasts and Solid Snake's arse? Oh, I haven't seen that yet. What do you think of that comic, Gal? Is that a good direction for Nintendo to go?
Oh, man, the world is a duller, sadder place without Snake's fine booty. And as for Samus, the whole thing was that if I remember correctly, the very first game she was in, no one knew it was a woman until the very end of the game. She takes off her suit, and you get like these still images of this of this very attractive young lady, out basically in like almost a black bikini,
right,
running around.
And the better you did at the game, the less she would be wearing. She could be wearing like a normal suit, or she could be wearing a bikini, depending on how awesome you were at Metroid. So Samus is a good illustration of sort of I guess the feminist dilemma in video games, because for many years she was very much this strong female character. You know, she'd go on adventures, she'd explore the galaxy. But I think it's not that feminists are the problem. I think it's that it's the academic feminists are the problem, where feminism is like their religion. It's the only thing they fixate on, because then when they look at something, the only thing they see, they don't see like fun comics book story, they don't see fun video game, they see like a world full of problems for them to defeat. What other kinds of fictional characters have like been really informative for you, that comic, Gal?
Well, actually, Samus was the first female character I ever encountered who wasn't getting kidnapped and having to be saved. So Samus was like one of the video game characters, at least, that I really idolized growing up, along with Lara Croft, who was the very first kick butt female I encountered in video games. And I actually sit in my dad's lap and watch him play the Tomb Raider games and the Indiana Jones games when I was really, really little. So Tomb Raider has a very strong part of my heart with it. That's for sure. I will say though that as far as, yeah, Lara Croft has definitely had a big influence in my designs of the character too.
What had a big influence? I think we lost a little part of that.
Lara Croft.
Croft, got it.
Yeah. um, Even if you've seen any of my more recent pics of Helen, in a few of my concept outfit designs for her, she had double holsters like Lara Croft.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's definitely because of the Lara Croft influence. Dual wielding pistols just still seems like such a cool, epic thing to me, and
yeah,
I entirely blame Lara Croft for that.
It's really interesting going back to an old property and realizing, oh, that really affects how I drew things or thought about things. That happens sometimes to me when I go back and look at an anime, and I'll see a character and I'll say, oh, it was after I watched this anime that I started drawing characters with this particular weapon a whole bunch. It's kind of a strange deja vu moment. You know, artists take in all of this info and we remix it and we create new things based on these ideas.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to video games and comic books, like all the most confident women characters are also sexy. Like Samus, I could say, is very confident, although she's more militant and she doesn't go around and as a little Clovian as she used to. She still had that confidence. Like, yeah, I'm wearing a skin tight blue suit. What you gonna say about it? I'll shoot you. And then of course there's Black Cat from Spider-Man, who I literally drew her when I was in kindergarten. That's how much I liked Black Cat and Spider-Man. And I drew both of them when I was in kindergarten and preschool even.
Yeah, it's at an early age that you start resonating with these characters and the themes in these stories. I just posted like a video where I shared some stories written by very young children who I work as an art tutor with,
Oh.
and they already they've been watching My Hero Academia, and they're already picking up on sort of subtle things within it, like how strong the characters are, or how a bad guy would fight as opposed to a good guy. So I really like that aspect of comics, is that they're informing young people's imaginations. And then you can see how young people immediately start applying that in their own stories. Like Spider-Man will start showing up in a story, or characters with similar powers to Spider-Man will start showing up in a story. I love it.
Yeah, definitely. That is so true in so many ways, actually. And I'd say like like Black Widow, of course, once more Laura Croft. These are all sexy, confident women, and yeah, they're sexy, and they're sometimes used for sex appeal and whatnot. But the thing is, they have a confidence and a beauty that any little girl can look up to these characters and go, I want to be that. I want to be strong and brave and beautiful and confident like that. And little girls nowadays, they just don't have as many characters like that.
This might be really important and worth underscoring. So that we could imagine someone who argues that if a female character looks like that, then a little girl might look at that female character and say, I don't look as good as that female character. I'm bad. I won't be happy unless I look like that female character. But what you're resonating with is that you're connecting the beauty of these female superhero characters with their confidence. And then what you take away from that is sort of the heroic confidence you need to have for regular life. Is that a good way of putting it?
Definitely. Um, honestly, I have a theory. I have a theory revolving around how feminists came to that conclusion.
Shoot, shoot.
No one told them they were pretty when they were little.
Oh, that is a thing. That is a thing, though. I mean, there's nothing immoral about looking ugly. Like, some people might be surprised by this, but I'm slightly less attractive than a Great Dane in real life, and I don't take that as anything to get bag on myself about, or get down on myself about. I can look at handsome male characters and see that as not I can't like strive to physically change my appearance, but I can sort of strive to act in a way that is heroic, like these beautiful heroic characters. And I think you're right. There is an aspect where it's almost like people who are ugly. It, they may tend to people who resent pretty people more often tend to be ugly people. But some ugly people, they take that as more like a charge to say, well, then I'm going to be like even better. If I can't change what my face is going to look like, I can change my behavior, and I'm going to act in a beautiful way.
Yeah, but instead of that, they're like, let's bring down the whole world instead. And the thing is, they like a lot of them aren't even ugly per se. Like if they cleaned up, if they lost a bit of weight, if they put more care into their hair and just taking care of and loving themselves, then you can tell they could be so much more beautiful. The thing is that they don't, and I feel like that could definitely be because when they were little, they were never told they were beautiful or that they could be a princess too. Or maybe someone, when they got a little bit older, told them that they were too ugly to be a princess, and that has
Mhm.
held them down for their entire lives.
I definitely think there's something to conscious to this whole political movement. It's a political movement that says we can't tell certain kinds of stories, that and our stories can't feature certain kinds of characters, and they will enforce it selectively. This is something I notice about a lot of woke comic prose, is they will draw heroic female and male characters, but they won't necessarily get how that would be a problem according to the SJWs they're catering to. Which is why I have a strong feeling that if social justice voyeurism became unpopular tomorrow, I think a whole lot of these comic pros would instantly leave off on the virtue signaling on Twitter, because I think a lot of them know that the entire comic book superhero genre is one big fat problematic element if you look at it that way. Uh,
Yeah.
so that comics gal, we talked about your inspiration in games. We've talked about sort of maybe this like political tension in comics and video games and how these characters are treated. Tell us a little bit about what comics have you been reading this past year? And you've mentioned how Hydra Cap almost broke your heart. So what have been the highs and the lows since you've become interested in comics again?
Ah man, I had to say the lowest low is definitely Hydra Cap. Second lowest low would be America Chavez, especially since I am Puerto Rican and another Puerto Rican wrote the character, you know? So it's just like, oh yeah, you're not very good representation of our people now, are you?
And what have you found any new characters that have spoken to you in a way that Laura Croft and Samus Aran have spoken to you?
Hmm. I'd say that when it comes to sexy confidence, Regina currently doesn't have that confidence, but I look forward to seeing her gain that confidence, and I look forward to seeing her growth and her journey that way. So I do see Regina as one of those characters. I would say that as far as female characters go, one of my favorite characters is I recently read Red Ninja Momiji.
Right, I'm familiar with it.
And Momiji, and just I love how the comic, or at least the way I read it, it kept me guessing whether or not Momiji was the good guy per se until towards the very end, and I loved that. And also once more, she's incredibly sexy and incredibly confident and incredibly capable, and so I really love that character. And Sugar Lightspeed from Little Girl Lethal, which doesn't have its crowdfunding out yet, but it should soon. I really adore that character. Not
Yeah,
only because of the sexy confidence and that she's attractive, but that character in particular just has so much joy. She reminds me a lot of Black Cat in that aspect. Black Cat was appealing to me when I was younger because she was sexy, she was confident, she was capable, but she also had this joy, that Catwoman who could be seen as like her DC version, or maybe she was Marvel's Catwoman version. But anyways, however you see it, she had so much more joy to her than Catwoman, and that's why I liked her more.
Catwoman definitely is more of a manipulator. There's this similar vibe to the two characters, but Catwoman toys with Batman, whereas Black Cat challenges Spider-Man in a lot of versions of the character. Now, they've recently I'm thinking of that panel where where Black Cat asks Spider-Man to marry her, and then she claws him and runs away. And Peter Parker says, "Oh, my leg, my feelings." So it seems like I think that Marvel just sort of consistently misses the whole point on a lot of these characters and their interactions. But generally, Black Cat is a fun character. She's a bouncy character. She teases and kind of forces Peter to have to think outside the box a bit to be able to deal with her.
Yeah, she's cunning and she's coy, but she makes a solution because she does like these games of cat and mouse with especially with Spider-Man. Because she likes him.
Tell me a little bit. I think you mentioned the character of Spider-Man pretty early on. Tell me about some of the male characters that have inspired you.
Ah, Dane. More than okay. See, the thing is, I'm older now, and the older you get, the more you start going, oh yes, that one is physically attractive, and so I shall overlook a great many flaws
Mhm.
when it comes to male characters. At least when you're a girl like me. So I will say that yeah, Captain America, Wolverine, Spider Man. Those were my jam growing up. Cyclops a little bit less so. Cyclops was kind of boring, and that
Definitely more Team Marvel than Team DC.
oh definitely more Team Marvel than DC. But you know I think at different points in time I have crushed on almost every Robin.
Well,
Okay.
they're all uniquely cool in their own way. Yeah.
Yeah, Dick and Tim probably getting the worst of it. And then like I got so ticked off at Dick for leaving Starfire that I just have like repeatedly called Dick a dick since I was little for that reason alone. Like no more little crushes on you, young man. You are your namesake.
Now we're of a similar age, so would I be wrong if I guessed that the Teen Titans cartoon was an introduction to the characters of the Teen Titans for you?
Oh yes, yes, definitely. Originally, I was introduced because I've always been more Marvel than DC, so I was definitely introduced to a lot of the characters of Teen Titans through the old cartoon. And then when I got older, I started reading a lot of the older comics. And the whole thing behind Dick and Starfire is that especially when I looked into it more as I got older, is they had like an entire script about the wedding and after the wedding and like Dick and Starfire going to live together, but the comic got canceled and they wanted to end it on like this big massive fight. So their wedding got interrupted by Raven going crazy and I believe beheading the priest or just killing the priest in
Yeah.
some way, and then they just never got married. And then later writers, especially in some of the a little bit less old Teen Titans versions, have Dick saying things like that he doesn't love her anymore, or that he guesses that he never really loved her, or that he only lusted after her. And I'm just like, you liar!
There's
I,
this, yeah.
I've
There's
read
this,
those old comics. You two were definitely in love.
and there's this weird aspect where I think writers are afraid to have characters who are together in a stable relationship. They want characters to constantly be pining or crushing on one another so they can have romantic triangles. But it's like they're afraid to have a couple that are married and have uh, some romantic back and forth between them. You don't have to have characters have unrequited love and saying, "Oh, does she love me? Oh, does he love me?" You can still have them uh, date or marry and still have that kind of fun aspect to the story.
Yeah, and that's the thing, especially recently. Like they've had two weddings that didn't happen, and it's just like, why? Why are you guys like this? And you just know that even though Rogue and Gambit got married, their relationship has been on again, off again for so long that you just know they're gonna have them break up at some point and to get a divorce.
Right.
It's just like, why can't anyone be in love and get married and be happy nowadays?
Yeah, you can have other forms of challenges like children. I've always thought that the most natural solution to the diversity problem, which wasn't really a problem because we always had diversity. We've
This
had
is true.
a variety of male and female and multiple races of characters going back decades. But it seems to me like having characters marry and have kids is a great way to introduce some new generations of heroes who you can have like some biracial couples. You can have all kinds of diversity in the next generation, and then they're not replacing their parents; they're learning from their parents. What are your thoughts on maybe what would help comics grow or be more fun in the future? Oh, I think that comic gal has to take care of the puppy again. I'm sorry. All right, so I'm going to take a look at the chat for questions. Okay, Vile Delinquist asks about Teen Titans Go, so I will remember to ask that comic gal about Teen Titans Go when she's back. Uh, People are chatting about DC and the Zack Snyder movies. Mike Whitaker is here. Let's see. Carl's Amateur Hour writes, comic writers do this odd thing where they take regular people in committed relationships into douchebags simply to kill said committed relationship. Yeah. So now, I mean, like there are committed relationships where people are mean to each other, and there's some yelling and stuff. I think that's a human trait. When you marry someone, you're marrying a human being with flaws. You're not marrying a perfect princess or a perfect prince. So some of that would be normal, but I don't like the idea of pumping up the nastiness in stories as kind of an excuse for breaking up a relationship because it's more fun to have single characters. It's almost like perpetual childhood. If you're, I'm not saying it's wrong to be single. I'm just saying that the aspect of always breaking up relationships in comics, it seems to de-emphasize the value of growing up and marrying and raising children of your own as a mature, different person. Well, that poor puppy has been interrupting our live stream a lot today. Uh,
Yes, he has.
all right, we're back. Sweet. So I just interacted with the chat a little bit while you were taking care of the puppy. I was asking you, what do you think comics could do to gain some more appeal in the future? What are some good things for you'd like to see in comics going forward?
Well, the thing is, I feel that you always have to know your audience. Like we in the community always try to know our audiences. Like I know for a fact that most of the people who read Rags are originally going to read it because Regina is a hot ginger and boobs. So
And that's just recognizing a reality, right? Men who buy comic books, that's for a big number of them, that's going to be just a appeal of the comic.
yeah, and then they read it and it's like, wait, there's more here, and she's going through all these struggles, and I want to see her overcome these struggles. So, no work, little guy. Uh, so, and I lost my train of thought.
Well, yeah. So you were talking about how Regina, the first impression you get of Regina is that she's got big boobs, and then you read the comic, and she's a human being with struggles. She has problems she's got to overcome, and that draws you in more than just boobs would. If it were just boobs, then there wouldn't be any story. It would just be a book full of women with big boobs. It's when you see their human drama that you identify with them, and that pulls you into the world.
Yes, very much so. And that's the thing. That's the thing. Comics nowadays, their characters don't struggle. And struggling and having struggles is how we resonate and just are able to put ourselves into the character's shoes because we struggle too. So when you take that away, you're taking away what makes a character human, what makes a character feel human. So if comics are going to survive, they need to remember not only their audience, the audience they're trying to appeal to, the audience that has the money, which is mostly male, and also take into account that there needs to be a good story inside, and that these characters need to feel human.
Now, I think you are already kind of worlds ahead of a lot of comic pros who see comic book writing as a vehicle for, I don't know, training people to think the way they want them to think. Do you see yourself as much of a writer at all, or do you only see yourself as an artist, or maybe a mix of the two?
I only see myself as an artist myself. When I grew up with two sisters, and the oldest one was always more of a writer. So if you've ever had siblings, you know how it works. You know, that's their, and you can't have their thing because it's theirs, and you need your own thing. So I've never ever seen myself as much of a writer. When I write, I tend to write the way I talk, which includes like a lot of ellipses.
All right, but have you, for example, do you ever imagine yourself like teaming up with your writer sister for like a dynamic duo sort of combo?
She and I like very different stories.
Okay. Well, what I see in your recent work is you kind of returned to art, and you are developing an art style, and it's an art style that is kind of very I see the manga influence in it, and you're able to capture a variety of characters using this. So I think there's a lot. I mean, you can do anything with art, and you've begun in a really bright way by just finding a community of people who are interested in similar things and are interested in your art. So at the very beginning of this, I think you mentioned how what's interesting about this community is how much feedback they give to us. Like I worked as an artist for years posting work, and I never got too many people interested to just regularly follow what I was doing. There were some, but I think that this dimension of us having a shared interest in comic fantasy stories really brings people together and makes people more enthusiastic when they see artists in the community or writers in the community.
Oh, it really, really does. And especially now, the current climate is just helping indie comics in particular so much, particularly ones that have interesting premises, interesting stories, interesting art, things that are intriguing that we haven't had for a long time, especially with the big two. And yes, this includes sexy ladies, but like everything should include sexy ladies.
Well, and having a healthy industry would help all of this too. When you read old comic books, they'll have these ads that say, "Hey kids, copy this drawing. We are looking for comic book artists," because that was a time when comic books were the American pastime. It was a huge industry. People did that instead of binging Netflix. They read comics. So comic book companies were desperate to get like little kids who are like young teenagers to be the next big artists. Now that it feels like the comic book industry is slowly dying, it feels like there's a lot of great talent and potential that's not getting tapped into. And what I like about this community is that unlike, I don't know, unlike something like Gamergate, where people can't really just make a whole bunch of video games all by themselves, we're seeing a lot of talented people make art and make whole comic projects like Wanpool. Everybody go move the needle for Wanpool on Comic Central.
Oh,
But
definitely. That was made by one person. Troy did everything himself. He's just incredible, really.
yeah, and it's infectious. You see all of this talent and this hard work that's being poured into these projects, and that makes you want to excel too.
Yeah, definitely. Especially me. I was accepted into this community of comic creators, and I'm the only one who doesn't really have a comic. So,
But
so just having knowing that, and they're all like, "Oh, but you create things. You're so talented." I'm like, yes, but I'm the only one here who doesn't have a comic.
but
I
there are
need to
whole
get
artists who
one.
have a career. There are whole artists who have a career based on doing portraits. So they're not necessarily doing sequential art or or writing their own comic because people have different goals or priorities. You're making art for a community, and people in the community are resonating with that. Now who knows? Maybe you'll reach the point where you're also doing some sequential art. Like maybe someone will want to hire you and pay you big bucks to draw their comic story for them. But just what you're doing at this moment is already significant. You are when I've interacted with a lot of comics pros who try to say these comics gators, they're all a bunch of racist, KKK, sexist, homophobe, transphobe, blah 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 blah. What I'll say to them is, you're talking about a group of people who are diverse and who are creative. And when someone like you makes art for this community, that proves me right. It proves that there's a lot of creative energy and a desire for making beautiful things in this group of people.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for making our art for the community. So, I'd like to give you a chance to talk maybe a little bit more about what you've learned from people in comics like Rags. You've talked about the appeal of the character of Rags. Tell us a little bit about um, people or artists and writers who and how they've helped you grow.
Oh, you have no idea. Once more, I was kind of accepted into this little group, and I've become such close friends to everyone in it. They're just absolutely wonderful people. I lack the ability with words to express how wonderful they are and how wonderful they've been. The Rags team have also been incredible, and everyone's always pushing me to improve, to be better, to work on my writing. Slick Timmy and Jack Irons have actually complimented my idea that I would like to turn into a comic once I have a bunch of commissions done and I have a bit more time on my hands to work on it. And that means so much to me, and they've given me their input and helped me shape things out a bit more. Uh, so even though they're both Slick and Jack are writers, they're not artists like me. Uh, I learn a lot from them in the writing area and from even drawing their characters, like drawing Sugar, for example. Sorry.
It's all
She's
right.
she's such a multifaceted character. She has that joy, but she's broken and she comes from this broken place. And she has friends who she wants to be friendly with and have fun with, but she also murders people at night.
Mm.
She has all these aspects to her that make her just like a complex and beautiful mess. And that's what she is. She's a beautiful mess. And whenever I draw her, I want to portray as much of these facets as possible. And for an artist, that is a challenge.
What you say reminds me of you've interacted with Matt Wanger, right? He's doing what's it called? Real Bebub. He's doing this Aldrake comic with like this big tough redneck guy with a dragon skull on his
Yes.
head.
Yes.
My very
I
first
haven't fan arted him yet.
Okay. My very first live stream was with Matt Wanger because I drew his character, and it's sort of like the act of drawing that character. You have to embody the character a little bit, and you have to think about, well, why does the character look the way they look, and you start getting clues for who they are as you draw them. It's like a more intense form of looking. You can just look at a picture of a character online, but once you start to draw it, then you have to kind of think about, oh, their shoulders are that shape this way. Oh, they have this kind of a shirt on. Okay, that tells me a little something about them. It's almost like you're spending so much time looking at the character carefully. You're learning as you go. That's an aspect to art. That's why I encourage almost anyone to draw, even if they don't primarily see themselves as an artist, because thinking about things that way, I think, is really helpful. Just a way of working your way through life, a bit more aware of what's going on around you. Uh, we were talking about what you've learned from writers like Jack. Oh, you've got some art. Let's put
Yeah,
this up.
I've been drawing. And she doesn't have clothes yet. I always draw the body first, no matter how loose the clothing is. She's it's just really simple, just a really simple rough sketch. She's just holding a wind chime, or at least a very rough version of a wind chime.
I like getting to see some of your underdrawing there. That's to me that's one of the most beautiful things about drawing is seeing how it got built up. Wunderbar.
Thank you. And I actually wanted to start showing it earlier, but I was enjoying answering questions too much, I
Oh yeah.
suppose.
Do you ever draw while listening to Uncle EVS or just some guy or anyone?
Well, all the time. The thing is, I have ADD. So
Yeah.
if something gets boring, as particularly when I'm inking gets boring because like I already drew all the lines, and then I have to ink everything, and it's just it gets a bit tedious as you're basically just tracing everything. So I will listen to live streams while I ink. I've actually participated in live streams while I've inked things, and it
It's
makes it
really
more
neat.
fun. It makes it more fun, so I can focus on it better.
I definitely think watching people make art is a really neat thing about YouTube because that was one of the big things for me in art school was watching my teachers at work. I mean, you can say draw a person this way, but if you watch your teacher do it and kind of see, oh, here's how they go about it, it's sort of like you gain knowledge that is very hard to describe in words.
For sure. And everyone approaches everything so differently. That's one of
Tell,
the reasons why speed draws actually irritate me a bit, because then you can't see their process as
yeah.
much.
Tell us a little bit for maybe for people who hadn't encountered your work before. Tell us a little bit about where we can find more of your work.
Well, I am over on Twitter, and whenever I finish something, I post it. I will say that I've had a Tumblr for a great many years, and you can go all the way down to like my college art if you scroll down far enough on my Tumblr. If you want, I can give you the link to that.
I'll update the description with the link to the Tumblr, and I've also included a link to your Patreon. So, uh,
Hmm.
why should people become your patron on Patreon?
Because whenever I'm working on projects, I do a lot of rough sketches, I do a lot of concepts and things like that that no one in the world is going to see unless like you're my BFF or a patron.
Very nice. So what I love about Patreon is it's giving artists a chance to do work and have something. So like it used to be like the Pope. The Pope Julius would hire Michelangelo to paint everything in the Sistine Chapel. So what Patreon is doing is, without popes building giant churches everywhere for people to fill with art. It's letting more people become supporters of an artist's work and maybe have a little feedback or get some special insight into an artist's work. So I'm glad you're using that platform that way.
Yep, and depending on what tier you pledge to, you will get a sketch from me. And actually, I live stream while I sketch every Friday.
Nice. So
So
what what kind of feedback do you get while live streaming with your drawing? Do people find it helpful to watch you draw, especially if they're thinking about drawing more or maybe even starting to draw for the first time?
I try to give as much advice as I can. It's on my YouTube channel, That Comic Gal. Um, Actually, you can watch the last one. I tried to give as much information about what makes things easier and why I do the things I do and things to keep in mind when designing a character and stuff like that. While I was drawing, I try to be as informative as possible because I do have a lot of people who are my followers who are trying to learn how to draw or improve their drawing, and I try to keep that in mind as much as possible.
And young people. It always surprises me when people who are like my baby sister's age, they're already on the internet, they're already thinking about some of these questions. Since I have younger siblings, I tend to think, oh, people that age, they're still babies. They don't have to worry about any of this stuff. But already the new generation is starting to rise and make art and read comics and play video games and think about some of these questions that we've been talking about. And I love that YouTube gives us an opportunity to sort of show them, here's how we work, here's what we've learned, here's some good things we've learned to do.
Yes, for sure. Um, Let me think. Other things is for my patrons. The more patrons I get, and the more I'm technically making per month, the more I can have that time available to give my patrons more. So basically, the more there is, the more time I can set aside, and the more I can do for patrons only. So hopefully someday we reach the first goal.
It's definitely a way of people voting to say we'd like to see more work from you. And I'm really happy. I think that more people should kind of like follow your model of finding a community, thinking about what that community likes, and just making time showing your appreciation for that community. I think that's a really important thing for artists to have today if they want to support themselves as an artist. Is you have to think about what who you want to appeal to and what kind of things they like, and you have to think about being professional online and interacting well with people online. It's an incredible gift, but it also takes some responsibility and some mature thinking to use this tool to use this tool well.
For sure, and you have to prove that you're gonna complete it. That you're not just gonna take money and run with it.
Yes.
um, and it's always good to make friends in the community who will challenge you. So, if possible, always make our friends with fellow artists, if you want to draw, because they're going to challenge you in incredible ways. My best friend since high school, she draws as well. She wants to go into animation though. So she has this very loose, very soft, very animated and movement filled style. It's very simplified, but um, I at the time when we first became friends, my drawings were very, very stiff. They were very detailed, but very stiff. And learning from her drawings helped me loosen up more, helped me have more movement and more flow to my drawings. And likewise, uh, I like to think that befriending me, her art has gotten a lot more detailed over the years.
That's really neat. It's an illustration of how artist feedback helps artists move forward.
Yeah. So always make friends with fellow artists, even if you two have entirely different styles. There's always something you can learn from one another.
Uh, so if you are in the chat right now, we have 14 watching right now. If you have any questions for that comic gal, at me and I'll see it pop right up, and you can be involved in this conversation. So far, maybe just to kind of look back, we've sort of told your story, that comic gal, of discovering this community, of you becoming like reawakened to your art and making more art again. You've talked about practical things you've learned interacting with other artists, and how fictional characters have it's sort of like you've learned things in life and you've learned things in art from reading and interacting with people. What are some, maybe just since we're looking back on what our conversation has been, what are some really important takeaways you would like young artists and writers to have uh, going forward? Maybe how could they benefit from what you've learned about comics and yourself in the past year?
Hmm. Well, our art teachers aren't always nice people, and like like my first art teacher in college actually kept trying to get me kicked out of the class.
Oh no.
That's like a funny story in of itself. She just didn't. She just apparently decided on like day two that she didn't like me, and it was just a mess from there,
Mhm.
which probably was one of the things that really took down my motivation when I left college, and probably one of the reasons why I wound up not going back. But the thing is, I have to say is I stopped drawing. I should not have done that. I technically tried to start drawings on several occasions, but I couldn't bring myself to finish them. And that's the thing, you can't do that. You have to always never stop drawing. Just never stop drawing. Draw every day. Do it often and just don't stop. Don't lose that motivation. No matter how much you think, oh, these people around me are so much better at this than me. I'm never going to get that far. Um, just I know it's easier said than done for sure, but don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Everyone learns at their own pace and everyone does things in their own way. You're not gonna learn as fast as someone who's been doing it for a lot longer than you. And you don't learn as quickly as like one of those prodigy artists. But that's fine. You're doing it your way, and that's going to be its own kind of beautiful if you just stick with it.
That's amazing. Jack Irons added us and said, Gal, how's your day going? The stream has been awesome, and I hope your day continues on these awesome notes. Smiley face.
Thank you, Jack. My day's been pretty good. Very loud doggos, but yeah, it's been pretty good. I'm roughly shading in some very tight pants right now.
Nice. Carl's Amateur Hour says, who is Gal's favorite comic artist? Who is your favorite manga artist?
Okay, so I'm gonna separate comics and manga, simply to simplify things a bit. I will say that my favorite comic artist right now, I'm really, really a fan of Kenneth Rocafort. Yeah, the first big two comics he did, if I remember correctly, are he did the New 52, Red Hood and the Outlaws,
Oh, I've been seeing that.
and he did Superman after that. I think he actually designed Superman's son. So,
Jonathan Kent.
Yes. I always forget Jonathan's name because he's a newer character. He's so cute though.
He
Uh,
is, and I like that before Brian Michael Bendis sent him off into outer space. I like how he was kind of a respectful, good kid. You know, it's nice to see a good
yeah.
kid who's not like a psychopath or anything.
Yeah, he's definitely a good role model for kids. He's fun, he's strong, he's brave, and he's freaking adorable and a good bean. He was too pure for this world, and so Bendis kicked him out of this world, apparently.
And do you have a favorite manga artist?
Uh, Favorite manga artist? Ah, man, there's so many. The thing is, like, people say, "Oh, all manga and all anime looks alike." That is definitely not true. That is not true at all. Everything is so different. It depends on what you're talking about. I'd say, I always go to the art of Soul Eater when it
Uh-huh.
comes to like funky angles and like fisheye lenses and effects like that. So if you want like a bunch of crazy angles and like almost cartoony movements at times of floppy noodle limbs on occasion, then Soul Eater is definitely a great comic for that. If you're looking for something with a lot of softness and more movement, then Kodomo no Jikan, which actually is a little bit inappropriate, and comics like The World God Only Knows are very soft but have a lot of movement. And you can tell, especially in the anime version, that the anime artist really took that softness and movement and brought it to life. So that's really amazing to see.
You can see as many variety of approaches to manga as you can see a variety of approaches in Western comics across a range of styles.
For sure. Like there's okay, yes, they keep for the most part it is kept to the big eyes, little mouths, pointy chins. But the thing is that and everyone who says that they all look the same is probably only watching like more recent moe harem anime, where for the
Yeah.
most part they use very similar styles for those. But if you actually read the comics and like go through them, you can see a lot more of the differences, and it's really really cool. Um, I will say that artists that are not in manga or in comic books, I'd have to say Audrey Kawasaki, who does pop surrealism, has amazing artwork, beautiful women, very sensual, and at the same time retains innocence. So it's a good combination of innocence and sexy. And if you guys are over the age of 18, feel free to look at her work. There's also
I think I think I've seen some of Audrey Kawasaki's work in museum shows. Even when I might have seen one in New York, there was an exhibition of contemporary Japanese artists. Is she a Japanese artist?
she is Japanese, but she's Japanese American if I remember
Okay.
correctly.
I like that you pay attention to different approaches or almost different appeals to the artist you're looking at. Fairly Shady says, any advice for getting good at drawing anatomy? I'm having some issues with proportions.
Proportions are a bit tricky. Of course, there's look at anatomy books, but I've rarely ever looked at anatomy books myself, so I can't really suggest any of those. Um, uh, I basically look up what top 10 anatomy books for beginning artists when I'm trying to give advice when it comes to anatomy books. For me, I always just study other people's art and other people in general. um, I like once more. I grew up with no friends. I was that kid who sat in the corner with a sketchbook in her lap. But from my little corner, I could see everyone else, and just watching everyone, watching their interactions, and how different everyone's faces and expressions and movements and everything was. That's a good thing to do too. Maybe not do it if you're over the age of 18, because at that point you're just going to be thought of as a creepy stalker watching
No.
people. And don't fixate on a single person because once more, you don't want to be mistaken for a creepy stalker. Um, but just like look at people. Just look at people. And I'd say that the only thing I really learned from the teacher in college who kept trying to kick me out of her class was gesture sketching.
Yeah.
And I'd say that if you want to get a pose down, you want to get a unique pose, or you want to like practice your poses and your anatomy from different angles and whatnot, then doing gesture sketches are is absolutely incredibly helpful. She actually hated my gesture sketches. She said that they were too clean.
Let's see. The Vile Delinquent says, any thoughts on Teen Titans Go?
Ah, yes. That abomination.
I
Of
had a
course.
feeling. I had a feeling we would get a strong reaction one way or the other.
That is not Teen Titans. That is some random cartoon with fart jokes aimed at small children that they kind of like reskinned to look like the Teen Titans because they knew that it
but
wouldn't
it
sell otherwise.
but it's making wild amounts of money. It must be good.
It's making wild amounts of money because my 4-year-old nephew and other 4-year-olds around the world watch it, and parents can just play it while they go do their thing, and their kids will be
Yeah.
memorized by the pretty colors and stupid fart jokes.
Now, while I was working as an art tutor, a mom came in with her toddler. So this is about a 3-year-old. And I think the mom probably had an effect on this, but the mom introduced the toddler to the original Teen Titans show. And so this 3-year-old was very opinionated about how much she disliked Teen Titans Go and how much she liked Teen Titans. And she told me a whole bunch of Beast Boy stories. So that was just kind of another example from my work as an art tutor where kids can pick up on the differences between the two shows really quick.
Yeah,
So even though Go is popular with young kids, I think a lot of kids do sort of appreciate that the old show doesn't condescend to them, and I think a lot of kids do like grown up stories that have a bit more, I don't know, sadness or realism to the emotions.
they do. Kids are so much smarter than a lot of people take them for. And the thing is, if you don't challenge a kid, then they're not going to prove how smart they are. You need to challenge them. And a lot of kids shows nowadays, they baby the kids. And they're not doing anything beyond what is like mandatory kid stuff.
I agree. Matt C. Now this might segue into it because it's about what would Matt C. asks, what does Comic Gal think the future holds for Comicsgate over the next year or so? And maybe kind of feeding into what we've been talking about. What would you like to see Comicsgate do? Because we've been talking about, dumb stories that kind of send to people. What do you want to see come out of Comicsgate in the future?
Ah, man, I can tell you where I want it to go, and I can tell you where I think it's going to go. Where I
Sure.
want it to go is I want it to continue to grow. I want a bunch of new creators who take this mood of, look at all these people around me and they're able to make it. Maybe I can make it with this story I've been wanting to create since I was young. Maybe I can make it too. And you have all these creators coming out of the woodwork because of that attitude that's going throughout the community like a wave. And I want to continue to see that. I want to continue to see more and more people come out of it because the thing is, this giant tidal wave is going to die off. And once it does, your chances of getting your name out there, of getting your voice heard, and getting your project looked at, are going to get much smaller. But those who ride the wave and get their name out there and show that they can deliver a good product, those are going to only grow from here. So at this point, it's like fall or fly, guys,
Seize opportunities before the opportunities pass you by.
for sure. You sounded very Edwin like right there with your
Oh,
word. Yes, he's
well,
always
thanks.
saying things like that. Seize your opportunities with his Edwin voice.
Aloha. I can't do it, but he's got a great voice.
Aloha. He's got a great voice.
Yeah, I think I might have been one of his very first YouTube videos. Was he was discussing one of my vids. So I take a little credit for making him uh, not a YouTube virgin anymore. MMDC says, don't know if it was asked, but what drove her to drawing?
What drove me to drawing? I wish I knew. Like I was drawing since I was a tiny babu. It, like I wasn't eating the crayons. I in fact did start drawing with them. And coloring books made me so mad because I hated staying inside the lines. So I take the black crayon and I draw my own lines
Yeah,
over the drawing.
yeah.
So it's just like it kind of came up from there. And when I was really little, I had a speech impediment. So whenever they were teaching you how to read, they would make you read out loud, right? So
Right.
then like the teacher and my parents, they just make me repeat the same words over and over.
Hmm.
I'm just gonna talk over the dogs. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Uh, they just they would make me repeat the words that I couldn't pronounce over and over because they thought that I was misreading them when in fact I just couldn't say them right because I had a speech impediment.
Mm.
And to have that happen in front of an entire class of people was just absolutely humiliating and embarrassing. So when I was little, I couldn't learn to read because I refused to learn how to read because to me reading was reading out loud and it was embarrassing and humiliating. So instead
Hmm.
of reading, whenever we had our mandatory library book checkout things once a week, I just pick up a bunch of picture books and I would stare at the pictures like, oh, that's really pretty. And then I guess at some point I found a pencil and I found a paper and I was like, I wonder if I can do that too.
That's very, but I find that meaningful because you were using art as a way of kind of developing your mind in a way where the school was having a difficult time identifying your problem and helping you learn to read. So you used art as a way of kind of learning in a different way.
For sure. And actually what eventually did get me into reading was I had a really great teacher who encouraged us to read more. And at some point I found this really big book, but it had a really pretty cover. So like
Uh-huh.
the art of the cover kind of drove me to trying it. And like it was a huge book, or at least huge to me at the time, called Hatching Magic,
Huh.
and it had dragons and magic, and of course I still love that kind of thing. So I started reading that and it was very hard, but by the time I was done with that book I was like, wow, that was incredible. I would like more of that. I was reading comics way before then though. Fewer words, mostly pictures, less intimidating.
I think that is an important part of what they contribute. They are they're sort of like the gateway drug to becoming a reader because you come to them for the pretty pictures, but you stay for the words and ideas.
For sure. And when you're a little kid with like a speech impediment who's made to read all the books out loud, I wasn't so much anti-reading as I was anti-book. And comics weren't books. This doesn't count. No one makes me read this out loud.
Ben Hatke, one of my favorite artists, he tells a story in he will draw little comics about stories from his life. So he draws this comic about how one of his daughters will not read, and so the parents are starting to worry about it. And then they hear the daughter staying up, laughing and reading Calvin and Hobbes books because she just is attracted to how fun the characters Calvin and Hobbes look. But when you think about it, that is a comic strip with really dense language. I mean, sometimes they talk about like college level ideas in
Yeah.
these Calvin and Hobbes comics, and the silly adventures of Calvin are your uh, doorway or your window into thinking harder thoughts. You start thinking about tougher things because of these.
Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes, it didn't treat kids or adults like they were stupid, like a lot of modern media for that age group does. It's about a very intelligent little boy with a huge imagination, and you can see that in even the way they talk. They use there's a lot of big words, if you will. So it's challenging, and with that challenge comes like kids wanting to rise to meet it, and kids will rise to meet it, but you need to give them the chance.
Accomplishing challenges feels good. It makes you feel like you are doing something worthwhile.
For sure. Um,
Kids love solving problems. It's a big part of gaming, really. The whole appeal of gaming is you are presented a problem and you got to work your way through it, and you feel great when you get it done.
Yeah, and you'll have a bunch of feminists say, well, most of the ways you fix things in games are by fighting, and that's violence, and that's teaching our children to solve their problems with violence. Like, yeah, but you're teaching them how to solve their problems. That's the more important part. It's not how the problem gets solved. It's that you're solving it. And that's an important thing for all kids to learn.
Jonah Arts actually asks if you've played games. Earlier you talked about Samus and Lara Croft, so this seems like a perfect chance to answer Jonah. What other kinds of games have you played that you've really appreciated that way?
Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
Legend of Zelda has been my jam. I was actually introduced to video games much later in life. And then they became like right up there with comic books. Once more, it's that escapism media. That video games have that same sort of thing as comic books in that it's escapism. And for me, Legend of Zelda, the protagonist doesn't talk, and you don't see his face most of the time in a lot of the first person 3D games. So you can just kind of imagine yourself in the costume going around doing all these heroic deeds. And that does a lot for a game because and it's not just the fighting, it's the helping people, the other people in the world who are going through problems that you can help them fix, and it's the puzzles you can solve.
Right.
It's everything together that just makes Legend of Zelda such a wonderful series that I love and adore, and probably will continue to love and adore. Hopefully, feminists and SJWs don't get their hands on it.
Right. When people call video games murder simulators, I look at Legend of Zelda as a volunteer service simulator. You are learning that it's fun to go help random people with their problems. I can't find my chickens. Oh, I'll help you find your chickens, ma'am.
Yeah, it's like Humble Farm Boy Simulator. Yeah. Humble Farm Boy who gets stuck on Grand Adventure Simulator.
Right.
That's what it is, though. And that, once more, that could teach kids so much about how to help others, about how helping others is rewarding, about how other people have their stories and problems too, and of course the puzzle solving. That's great. And like I think I played Portal when I was younger. Portal was great. You felt like an idiot most of the time until you got the puzzle, and it was like, it was this. It was this the whole time, and I solved it. I'm so freaking smart.
Awesome. I don't remember the title of the book. I think it's something like TV is Good for You or something. And it uses The Legend of Zelda as its example. And the whole point that the book is trying to make is that if you made this a math problem, this would be an advanced logic problem. And so the kid is like given, oh, here's the problem. You got to get through the locked door. Here's the tools you have in the room. Try some things out and see if you can get through the locked door. And it was just a really eloquent way of making the point that if this was a word problem in a test, it would be testing you on your ability to solve logic problems.
Definitely. Yes.
But in the context of an adventure story, it's fun.
It is. It's fun. And the thing is, it has a reward. It rewards you at the end. You get the peace of heart. You get that you get that thing that you need to do the thing. It's a reward basis. And the thing is that we need to teach kids to feel good about doing good things. Because when they get older, there's not always going to be good things that happen when you do good things. But
Yeah.
they need to still know I did a good thing and feel good about it, even when there isn't some sort of reward at the end.
Hmm. Right. Affirmation of good behavior is maybe like that might be better than giving them a piece of candy because you're verbally making them aware of think about okay the reason you what you did was good is this and I think that's important for when there's bad behavior too. It's not just enough to say okay you're in the corner. They got to think about here's why the doing that running tackle chokehold was on the other kid was wrong.
Oh, for sure. I actually did work with kids for a time. I was a tutor for
Oh.
an after school program. I worked mostly with older kids because I had difficulty talking in a way that younger kids could understand.
Hmm.
But the thing is, they are so smart. And I had this one little girl. Her parents were had come from Mexico and they couldn't speak English very well.
Mm.
And they couldn't read English very well either. So they had difficulty helping her with her homework, and they put her in this after school program. But this little girl was so intelligent. She could get math problems like no one's business. And she was like in a she was in like in a private Catholic school, and she had very advanced problems to solve, and she'd solve them really well and really quickly. What she had problems with was her reading comprehensions, like word problems and math, and in spelling. And I'd actually stay there for extra hours after I was supposed to leave to make sure, especially the day before a spelling test, that she could spell every word perfectly. And the thing with math is kids are better at math because it has a pattern. So what I would do is to help her learn how to spell things is I'd make up a pattern or a song or a rhyme to go
Yeah.
with it. And that helped her a lot.
Yeah. So while working as a tutor, you're thinking creatively about how to help the child work through the problem. Yeah. It's creative problem solving.
Yep.
I love that. I'm kind of clicking. I've been clicking with you a lot because I've worked as an art tutor and I've learned things from my own art and writing from that experience. You see kids go through young people problems and you're supposed to help them think through this reading problem or think through this math problem, and that actually teaches you how to think through these problems better in your adult life. You have to learn something really well to be able to teach it.
Oh, for sure. Like I was just an older kid, but like and when a lot of the kids kind of graduated from the class I was tutoring and they went to middle school, they'd still come by and visit me all the time and give me hugs because I like there's an effect you have when you do that. And the thing is if you treat them like they're stupid, then you're gonna have a kid or then you're gonna have a kid go up to you like I can't do this, I'm too stupid. You never treat a child like they're
Mhm.
stupid. And for comic books too, you don't want to treat the reader like they're stupid. You don't want them, especially since they're old enough that they know they're not stupid.
Yeah.
In most cases,
You have to look at it as you don't look at it as a problem that you can't solve. You look at it as a problem you haven't found the solution to yet.
for sure.
The vile delinquent says, male booties or female booties? Pick a side.
Female booties, they're more curvaceous. There's just a lot more cushion and roundness to them.
Definitely. I think that whenever I love to draw the Hercules, the weary Hercules, because that's like a really good. That's a good example if you want to study like a male's gluteus maximus. But his is very squarish and almost dimpled. It's muscular rather than I don't know what you've described essentially.
Rather than the round plumpness that I so
Right.
desire in the booties I art.
Yeah. And if you want more of those, you can support that comic gal on Patreon and see all of those. Fantastic.
Okay, so
Well,
I finished this one, and I've started roughing in this one. So this is kind of what my rough sketches look like, um, when I'm not trying to figure out a pose anyway. And yes, my room is a mess. I'm gonna turn this off. My bedroom is a mess right now.
Better than my room. Better than mine.
I don't spend a lot of time in my bedroom unless I'm drawing, so it just tends to build up.
That there can be an aspect of, like, I once had an art teacher give me the advice of collect everything because you could use it for art, and I took that literally, and I just started collecting junk that I would say, oh, I will turn this into an art project one day, and then a year goes by and I've got like a room full of junk that I'm never going to turn into art, and every little scrap piece of ripped uh, paper from and then I just said, no, wait a second, I need a more logical solution to this problem. I have enough. I have enough supplies to make art. I just need to stop collecting random junk on the theory that maybe I'll make art out of it. So yeah, I think artists tend to struggle with that as a group of people.
Well said. I'll also say I have an inspiration drawer.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, when I was in college, we actually took like a bit of a college field trip to nearby printers, and they had this room of like extras, and just let us pick which ones we wanted to keep.
Wow.
And so I just went home with this giant bag full. So I have like everything from like a Chinese restaurant menu
Huh.
to just like a bunch of cards and like other people's graduation things from that printing place. And the thing is, it's mostly for like the patterns and the inspiration,
Right.
and like buildings and stuff that I have difficulty drawing. So I have this room full of it.
This is, yeah, you've talked about something really important, which is it's critical for any designer or artist to start collecting examples of things. Because if someone says to you, make me a Chinese menu, how do I make a Chinese menu? I need to look at good Chinese menus to know how to make one and get a feel for what will go into making that kind of a project. There's a really neat series on YouTube that Udacity has posted for free. I think it's called The Design of Everyday Things. And they just walk you through some really simple ways of thinking about, what makes a good car door handle versus a stupid car door handle, where you fumble with it and you don't know how to open the dang thing. And that's really important for artists to think about, because I think it's easy. Well, artists tend to think about how things look a lot if we have to draw them, but it's also important for us to think about how they work as well, so we kind of understand what it is we're drawing or what we're writing about.
Especially if you're like working on like a sci-fi or a fantasy, then in that case you have to think about, okay, how does this work for us, and how do I make a working thing within the context of this world that differs from that?
Yeah.
I'll also say that my inspiration folder on my laptop is interesting, especially since I have drawn so much Regina, so it has like a ton of gingers.
Okay.
For freckle references. And there's actually a little bit of an embarrassing story about the Ghostbusters art I did of Regina, the Ghostbusty one.
Tell us about it.
I had to draw freckly boobs, and I couldn't find any references for freckly boobs outside of porn. So I just wound up screenshotting, like pausing and screenshotting.
Oh my gosh.
I've never been on Pornhub before in my life. But for that project, I did so. And there are things that can't be unseen.
One alternative route is to practice geometry, so using geometry in anatomy, and then you kind of can construct what you need the body to be, even without looking at it directly. So like what I would do is, if I look like, I don't know, like if I look at a photo of a clothed woman, if I can kind of like construct the ball shape of the breast, then I can know, okay, so here's how the texture of the skin will wrap around that shape. Like, this is going to be weird, but my teacher used to describe it as, if you were to grab onto the thing, how would your hand wrap around it? And that's the way you think about how to draw it, because if you grab a ball and your fingers curl around the ball, that's the way that light and texture is going to curl around the ball too as you draw it.
That is very well said. In my case, I could get the shape down. It was just the pattern of freckles.
Yeah.
I needed to figure out like where do they tend to be more clustered together? Where
Yeah.
do they tend to be where do they tend to be farther apart? That kind of thing. And I just couldn't find a single picture of freckly tits. So
Okay.
that wound up being my method of doing things.
I'm sure you were like checking over your shoulder for your parents while you were working on that art
Oh
project.
yes. It's always difficult to live with your parents, especially when you're working on such things. I'm pretty sure they still have a lot of interesting questions about my pictures of Zira.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I'm sure they're also pastors, so I'm like sure that they're very concerned for my soul at this point.
I had a season like that. I've told the story that I did weird for a while, and the thing about weird postmodern art is that it tends to have this shock value to it if anyone's going to remember it at all. So I have these teachers that say this is the important art of the 21st century. So I say okay, and I just start making whatever shocking thing would come to my mind. Literally, I just like write down a list of what are crazy ideas I can do, and then I just start doing the ideas on that list. It almost got me in trouble at school a couple of times, and I essentially just had to like get to the point where I said, I don't know why the heck I'm doing this anymore. I love drawing, and then get back to the drawing, which I love. But one of the things I worry, I mean, for the thing I'm describing is postmodern art. You're describing, kind of having to draw something embarrassing. But it almost worries me a little bit that some art schools, not only do they teach kids to do really crazy stuff in the name of performance art, but they don't even teach kids practical skills. Sometimes you go in there hoping I will learn how to draw, and you come out saying, well, I guess the only point of art is to make, I don't know, like giant sculptures out of blood or something like crazy like that.
Yeah, just make a statement. And it's not just postmodern, but modern art as well. Like it's squares. They are like entirely white canvases that sell for millions of dollars. And it's just like I would like to see if these people who make the, like Picasso, for example, he could actually he could really do realism. He just decided not to.
Right, especially when he was young.
If you look at his younger, older works, like he could do realism. He just decided not to. And that's the difference between his art and just like literally not being able to do so.
It is kind of interesting though. There's a movie about the old Picasso drawing, and they put him in front of a piece of glass so you could see what he was drawing through the glass. And it's just really bizarre watching him work, because you can see like the kind of cartoony animal come into existence, and then he paints over it and he draws like a cartoony house. I kind of look at Picasso as a cartoonist who was lucky enough to become like the most famous artist of his generation, because I think he was really interested in how children drew things. So he could draw realistically. He became fascinated with how children draw things, and he kept pushing his art more and more in that direction. So people give him flack, but I really like children's art, so I don't mind using him as an example of here's kind of this simple idea that children have when they draw a character or when they draw something like their house.
And not just him either. You mentioned Michelangelo, how he painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. If you look at the works he did later in life, you see that he started becoming a lot more rough. Instead of like focusing on making things beautiful, he was focusing on portraying emotion. So like his carvings in particular were incredibly rough, and mostly he left it as raw stone. And it's just raw stone with like this almost screaming face coming out of it. It's a little bit disturbing, but at the same time you can see as an artist he spent all this time making things look good, but they lacked a lot of emotion.
I think there's some good. There's a definitely solid take on Michelangelo in what you've said. He gets older, and maybe like he's even more aware of his own death, coming to him. The young Michelangelo, loved him some big, muscly bodies. The old Michelangelo, there's like a lot of sadness, and there's more emaciated figures. The dead Christ, he isn't jacked anymore. Now he looks like a dead body. Really fascinating man.
Yeah, and it's always something to pay attention to, because artists are always going to have this want to evolve and improve. But the thing is, back in the climate back then, whatever makes you famous, you're kind of expected to continuously do things of. A more modern example would be Thomas Kincaid. He
Oh yeah.
painted lights and landscapes very well. But the thing is, that was what he was famous for, and he wound up only painting lights and landscapes. And I feel like being caught in that box as an artist definitely had a hand in how things turned out for him, which were very tragic.
Fairly Shady asks what your favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe movie is.
I'm biased towards my captain.
Captain America, yeah.
Yes, I'm always going to be biased towards my captain. I'm still hoping for a Black Widow movie, because I do as a female want to see a female like an entire movie of a female superhero kicking butt. I liked Wonder Woman for that purpose, but the thing is, Wonder Woman was also very corny and predictable. I knew the guy was going to die. I still cried anyway. I was like, no, don't do it. Do not do the thing. There are other solutions. But nope. Just nope. He just couldn't stop himself.
What's your opinion on the Marvel versus DC movies in general? I tend to think of the DC movies as a little bit too dark and gritty for superhero stories. Do you share that opinion, or do you like the DC movies?
Well, I'd say that a lot of the look of DC movies can be attributed to a certain Snyder.
Yeah.
And the fact that the first DC movies to get popularity were Batman movies. So I think that had a huge hand in the fact that they decided to kind of stress that Gotham like dark, gritty feeling to try and to keep people interested, because hey, it works for Batman. The thing is, what they forget is all these other heroes aren't Batman. You can stop now. And that's probably why the DC shows have been doing better than the movies in many ways. Until their plots get lost.
Yeah. What do you think about Shazam?
I like that actor. I really like that actor. I really do. And the thing is, I know that actor is going to do such a good job. My issue, especially at portraying, because I think it's Zachary Levi. He's done a great job, if I recall, as Chuck. I want to say Chuck and Flynn Rider. Maybe it's not the same actor. I'm pretty sure it's the same actor. Looks like the Shazam, Zachary Levi.
I like that the trailer shows.
Zachary Levi.
I like that the trailer shows it's going to have a sense of humor. Like, the only thing I'm worried about is, what if it's just wall to wall Captain Marvel being a goof, and we don't get to see his really heroic side. But yeah. I do like that we're going to like be a little less super serious about a story about a man in a giant red and yellow lightning outfit.
Yeah, particularly considering the whole thing with Shazam is he's really just a little kid named Billy underneath that. And he's just a pure-hearted little kid. Like, you think Superman is the Boy Scout. No, Shazam is like the Boy Scout times 10.
Yeah.
And I really hope, like, they chose a good actor for that. Zachary Levi with Chuck, even with Flynn Rider. He does a great job of portraying those characters who are pure underneath things.
Yeah.
Flynn was a pure little kid who just liked these stories about a famous thief. And underneath everything. And with Chuck from the series Chuck, he was just a really pure nerd who kind of just wanted a girlfriend and just wanted to live a happy life and got
Yeah.
caught in a bunch of spy stuff.
Huh.
But that pureness still came out a lot in that show, and that was like his first big part, if I recall correctly. So they chose a good actor for the role, and I like that it's not going to be nitty gritty. So I'm actually looking forward to Shazam. My concern is that they're gonna lean too well, like you said, they might lean too much on the comedy and the fact, hey guys, isn't it funny? This is a little kid in a giant man's body. Instead of
Yeah.
looking at the pureness of the character and the wholesomeness of the character, because we all know no heroes can be wholesome nowadays.
Yeah.
My Captain, why?
Ha.
They take wholesome characters like Captain America and destroy them by making them Hydra the whole time. So
Yeah.
like you would think and like Superman was wholesome, and then they had him kill someone and had him kind of act like some emotionless. Well, yeah, they had him act like an alien, and I guess you
Right.
could argue that as, well, he is an alien, but he was an alien raised by humans. Dang it,
Right.
he's supposed to be
Right.
a humble farm boy.
Kansas upbringing.
Exactly. He's supposed to be this humble small town kid. And that's what makes Superman human. What makes us relate to him as a character. He's this wholesome character, but they emphasize the alien too much, and he doesn't feel human in that movie anymore. He doesn't feel
Yeah.
human in the Justice League movie either. Like, there's no way Superman would wake up from a coma, even if his memories were gone, and immediately start attacking people, especially when two of those people were like young adults, almost teenagers.
Yeah.
And especially in the case of Flash. Flash was clearly a young man, almost kid. There's no way Superman would just attack this kid out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That really that was messy. But it's just like I don't want them to do that to Shazam, because like I said, he's like the wholesome Boy Scout miss times 10, and that's such a big part of who he is. If they mess that up, I am going to be so ticked.
My dad lived in the age when Captain Marvel was more popular than Superman, and I'm gonna sit down and try to read some old Captain Marvel stories because I've really loved old Superman stories. But he is very much the kid's character, like even the kinds of bad guys he would fight and how he would he would punish them without killing them. He is very much a character created by at an age where comics were for kids, and who does things that kids would really dig in his story. I can see that survived the generations, even though really old comic books can be kind of cheesy. The appeal of that character survives all this time down the road.
Yeah, the cheese in a weird way is kind of part of this character.
Yeah. Jonah Arts asks, do you believe that animation is a form of art even for games?
I believe games and animation are art. And the reason I believe that is, once more, for the same reason comics are art, is it's escapism. It's showing you, letting you peek into a new world and emotions and all this other things. And I feel that if it can get an emotional response from you, then it is art. It might not be art you like, because that emotion might be, this is complete boom. But the thing is, it got an emotion from you.
Now, Jonah may have brought this up because I've talked in this channel before about how I kind of firmly say I do not think that comics and video games should be called art, but I mean something very specific by that. What I mean is I worry that there's a movement to say video games and comic books are art, but what they really mean by that is that video games and comic books have to be stuffy and intellectual and political and not fun. So I think I agree with what you're saying, even though it sounds like we disagree. The reason I say I think we do disagree is I'm okay describing video games and comic books as art if what we mean by that is art is about doing something meaningful, making beautiful pictures, telling meaningful stories. Well, in that sense, yes, they overlap a whole lot. The only reason I've ever been hesitant to say video games and comic books is I always think about like the stuffy grumpy professors who are kind of like peering over your shoulder, saying, "Oh, I don't like that comic book. I wish that all these comic books and video games had what I think art should be in them."
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I will say that for me there's a significant difference in that a lot of art and comics and video games, they're created from this place of having something you want to tell and having something you want to create, and just and they come from a place of emotion, whether that emotion be from love or joy or just trying to vent and get out frustrations. You can get a feel of that emotion from looking at it. And the thing with these modern comics, where they're just like, well, comics are art, so I can tell the story I want, is like, it doesn't feel like art because it's not coming from that place. It's not coming from the same place. It's coming from this place of spite. Like, it's just like a big FU to the viewer almost.
A lot of people are really resonating with what we talked about Shazam and Billy Batson. Eve La Renaissance says, "I want the wholesomeness back." And Jack Irons says, "Billy Batson is the ultimate version of how you represent a kid's desire to do better in a very adult world." I love that so much. So I think you had a chance to speak
That's
to some
actually
people.
beautiful, Cody. That's actually beautiful, Jack. A beautiful way of saying it for sure, and very accurate.
Cody, because I first encountered him as Jack Irons, I always think of Cody first as Jack Irons in my head. Jack Irons, creator of Jack Irons.
Yeah. I try to call him. I call him Cody in DMs and on live streams and stuff. But for the most part, I do try to call him Jack, simply because that's the name on his icon.
Yeah.
And on Twitter, and I want people to be able to find him.
Right.
Nico in here?
No.
Okay.
Puppy's not in here. Sorry.
It's all right. I'm gonna be having roommates soon, so I'll probably be having some moments like that on my live streams.
Yeah. My parents.
This has been a great conversation. I mean, we've really covered like your journey into Comicsgate and back into art. We touched on games and art in general and comic books. So I feel like I've gotten a really good feel for kind of who you are and what you're doing with the drawing you're doing. What would you like to talk about that might be of interest to the people watching?
Man. Are y'all sick of Star Wars rants yet?
I'm sure that EVS has done 2 live streams on the matter while we've been talking.
Most likely. I will say that
the thing that's trending is Demi Lovato OD'd but didn't die.
That's great, Dad. Thank you for stopping by while I'm being interviewed to tell me about that.
It's a trendy thing to be interviewed about.
Yes, it's always trendy to be interviewed about your drug problem.
Tell Mr. Comic Gal that I said hi.
I'll make sure to do so later. My parents were both nerds though. Like my mom was really into Star Trek and my dad was really into Star Wars. Somehow they made it work.
Yeah.
But my mom has always loved Wonder Woman and had a crush on Superman.
Huh.
And my dad has dark hair and blue eyes. So she likes to joke. She married her Superman. And my dad insisted he's Batman instead. It's an interesting family dynamic. But because my parents have been into nerd media, I got introduced to older comics and older nerd media from an early age. And so I have that love of these things. That includes Star Wars and older comics and all this stuff. So even though I'm only 21, I share opinions with all these guys who are like 40 years old sometimes. And I find that pretty interesting.
Well,
it bridges a generational gap, really.
Yeah, I mean, there can be a gap between the things that generations like, but things like Superman and Batman and Star Wars tend to bridge those gaps pretty well.
They do. I feel like a lot of the issue with a lot of the kids my age were like, well, I like the prequels. is that well, first off, visually the prequels are more up to date to what my generation expects from movies, and it's very obvious that the original Star Wars trilogy has visually aged quite a bit. So my generation might be a bit more about the visual, but the thing is, it's so much more than that. Like the prequels are very talky.
Yeah, I think about that a lot because I think that visual learning is going to be very important for the next generation. I mean, it already is very important, but I think as more and more people use screens for everything, they're going to expect pretty pictures with more and more things. So I,
Which is another reason why comics is gonna fail. At least the big two are gonna fail.
Mhm.
No one's pretty anymore.
Yeah. And what's ironic is they should be doing well because people are now more interested in visual storytelling, but they're competing with the internet and Netflix and piracy, and they're insanely picking this moment to be rude to a bunch of the fans on the internet. Come on, gang.
Yeah, they've set themselves up for failure. I held out hope for as long as I could, but at this point, I'm 100% an indie comics gal. At this point, when it comes to modern comics, and that's all I'm reading because I don't want my heart broken by Marvel anymore. I've taken enough heartbreak from you. Um, and like I believe I posted on Twitter just a few days ago that my thoughts on Marvel, and then I just posted this parody of the song "Let It Go." It was like "Let it burn, let it burn. They're no longer my concern." Yeah, because they are no longer my concern. I'm doing art for indie comic folks now. I am thoroughly in indie comics, and I refuse to leave here now. This is my home.
I think that's fair because you're going to find a lot more variety in the indie comics scene because it's only limited by the imagination and energy of people who participate in that field.
Oh, for sure. Um, there and it's the thing is it's all new ideas or new takes on ideas. And the thing is, Marvel's just trying to recapture what it used to do, but at only the bare basic level. And like, oh yeah, this was about this, like heroes fight bad guys, and Captain America punches Nazis. Yes, that is exactly what people want to read, and that is what we are going to give them. Only we're gonna give them modern Nazis.
Right. Jack Iron says, "Hey gal, Troy will break your heart here soon. Just one more day." And I think he's referring to interesting independent comic projects coming down the pipeline soon.
Troy will break my heart. Are you saying he's not gonna make another One Pool? Because that's the only
No,
thing that would break.
I think he means he'll break your heart with joy with lots more wine.
Oh, he better. I will yell at him.
Oh yeah, Ravi in one. Yeah, I haven't made my wine pool video yet, but I mean, so Mr. Marvel makes this comic, and he introduces Robbie feeling like the emotion of sadness and crying, and that is great visual storytelling. Like I already think of Robbie as more of a character than half of the Marvel comic characters, because Mr. Marvel took the care to show emotion for his characters.
I love Robbie. And like did you see his butt? He has a great butt.
Yeah.
This is important for characters. We all know that a character has only as much personality and relatableness as they have curve of butt.
Now here's what Jack Irons just clarified. Nope, he said he will break up Robbie and Juan. I feel like we are This is like breaking news for Comicsgate culture.
No. He's not allowed to. No. Oh, why? No, don't hurt my Robbie.
Hey, Jack, I think you broke the heart of my guest here.
No, that's not okay. That's just not okay. How dare he?
Well, we don't have
we don't have direct confirmation yet. We just have internet rumors from our boy Jack.
Oh, well, the thing is, Jack and Troy actually talk. I talk to Troy too. So, I'm gonna talk to Troy later for sure.
Yeah.
Very not nice way.
Jack says hashtag save Juan and Robbie. Well, I don't know. I'm all for breakups as a means for character building in stories. So we'll have to see. Maybe we've started like a new like sub hashtag for Comicsgate here of outrage against Mr. Marvel. But I am a firm supporter of creative choices, so I'll have to wait and see.
And like they better get back together or something. Like I can't take another Dick and Starfire. You don't understand. Robbie is only on for like a couple panels, and he's already like a precious being I want to protect. And that honestly goes to show Troy's artistic and writing ability. The fact that I am disattached to a character after only seeing him for a few panels.
He built up his character. He established his character immediately in a one issue story, so that and I've had this impression of Mr. Marvel just by interacting with him about like comic ideas we've had. He thinks about the internal mindset of his characters, and that shows up in how he draws them.
It does. It really does. And honestly, like modern comics needs more Troy. But because of that, I'm really attached to that character. Robbie's a precious being I want to protect. This news has me genuinely upset at him now. And the thing is, it's not a bad kind of upset. It's an upsetness because I love this character and I want him to be happy.
Right.
And there's a different kind of upset going around in comics with a different cause, where it's more like, I don't like this character. No one likes this character. Why are you shoving this character at us? Why did you replace the good character with this character? And that's a big difference of what's going on in the indie comics and what's going on in the current big two.
Yeah. Well, I guess time will have to tell what the Wanpool situation is. I can say that everyone should go move the needle for Wanpool.
Yes, buy Wanpool, fall in love with Robbie, just like everyone else. Turn gay for Robbie and his booty. It's a good booty.
Well, thank you for the breaking news, Jack Irons. You definitely took over the stream with that live chat comment.
How dare! We're gonna have words, Jack. We will have words.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like we've had we've been going for about 2 hours. So we've had a good chance to touch on you, your work, your connection to the community, all these projects that you've done fan art for. You're clearly very enthusiastic for these comics creators. And so I really want to thank you just for all the art you've been doing and all the sharing you've been doing of these projects. One of the reasons I really wanted to do this stream is you literally helped remind me that I was supposed to go move the needle for Beatdown Girl. I did a whole live stream with the creator, and I said, "Yep, I'll support Beatdown Girl." And things started happening in life, and I almost missed the deadline, but your fan art reminded me. And I think that's something really important for this community to remember as we go forward. Is we're really helping one another to make these comic projects come to life.
We are. They wouldn't be able to exist without everyone's help.
Yeah.
And that's why we need each other, and everyone in the community is needed. The artists are needed. The writers are needed. Pencilers, inkers, colorists, and of course, what's a comic without readers, without buyers, without customers? That has to be the most important part. Like, we can create nice things all day long, but it's not going to be a thing without people to enjoy it.
Very well said, that comic gal. So I think we're going to wrap up for the night. Please do check out that Comics Gal's Patreon in the description below, and her Tumblr. You have a very long Twitter username. Oh, good. I included that as well, at Azriel 2966539 to follow her Twitter for more updates. Azriel, why don't you wish our chat, send our chat off with some final thoughts?
All right. That comic out here to remind you, Avengers currently sucks, so be a comic revenger instead. Go for indie comics, and remember, just none of this it would be possible without you. And these people need you. Be a hero for comics, support these comics, or create these comics, whichever floats your boat, or even do both if you can. Because comics are changing, and you guys are the means for that change.
Wonderfully said. So with that, I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. Thank you so much, that comic gal, for joining me on this live stream today. Thank you for the chat. Some great questions we had from the chat today, and thank you so much for moving the needle for independent comics creators. With that, I love you guys, and I'll catch you later.
Bye.